In tutorial 10, we're going to look at automating tasks with macros. If you've worked with prior versions of Access, you're going to see some significant changes in macros with this version of Access. Our objectives for this chapter is we're going to run and add some actions to macros. We're going to learn how to single step a macro so that we can find where the errors exist in it. We're going to create a sub macro. In older versions of Access, they called those macro groups. We're going to add a command button to a form. We're going to attach a macro to a command button, create an unbound form, and you created unbound forms in tutorial 6. We're going to add a list box to a form. You added a combo box to a form in tutorial 6. This is a slightly different but very similar method. We're going to look at writing an SQL statement to fill a list box with object names. We're going to be pulling those from a system table, and I'll show you how to get into the system table as well. We're going to create multiple macros on a form, and we're going to create a navigation form. Navigation forms are also new to this version of Access. In the past, we tended to use switchboards, either from the switchboard manager or user-created switchboards. So let's take a look. Here in session 10.1, the macro designer window. And as I said, if you've seen earlier versions of macros and or seen macros in earlier versions of Access, this one does look quite a bit different. It is just as easy or maybe easier to use. A macro will perform an action or a set of actions that you want Access to perform automatically for you. There's some things that are best suited for macros and some things that are best suited for VBA. So you need to know how to use both of them. In tutorial 10, we're going to look at macros. In tutorial 11, we'll look at VBA. And here in figure 10-1, just a list of some of the possible actions that you can create in Access macros. Also suggest that you use the help or go online and just ask about Access macros, Access actions. You're going to find some very good help online. In the macro design group, we can click the Run button to open up a macro in design view and work through it. If you double click the macro, it will start running. That may not be what you want to do, so open it in design view. So you right click on it, open it in design view, and then see what you want to do with it. The macros that are created beginning in page AC 523 in our book have a series of message boxes that appear. You will open a message box, and then you'll perform an action, and then you'll open a message box, and then you'll perform an action. What I want to draw your attention to in this is these message boxes are inserted into this macro only to slow it down. If we did not have these message boxes in here, all you would see is the end result. Of course, you could step through the macro and see each action perform. But with this, the message boxes tell you what's going to happen, and then you see it happen. When you write your own macros, you will not be inserting these message boxes. These message boxes are only for you to see each action in the macro as it happens, or just before it happens. It is not standard procedure for a macro. You will not be inserting these in your macros. This is just a way to slow the macro down so you can see what's happening. So it will walk you through how a macro was created in the Macro Designer. Remember, as I said earlier, that this new interface is much different than what you're going to see in older versions of Access. Single stepping a macro, you'll be able to execute one step in the macro at a time, pausing between actions. This is the way that you would check your macros that you create rather than putting the message boxes in. Once you turn on single step on the Design tab, it will stay on until you turn it off. So you have to remember to turn it off. Macros are very easy to attach. We can actually right click and add them through the properties, which you're going to see in the book, or we can even drag and drop a macro onto a form, and I'll show you that in my demo. Submacros. Submacros used to be called macro groups, and really what it is, it's a series of macros that are all grouped together so that you don't have 10 macros on your navigation pane that all work with the same form, and you're trying to figure out which one you want and taking up a lot of space. You can create a macro group or a macro for the form and then create a series of submacros within that main macro so that when you pull it off the properties box, you see the name of the macro group, and then you can pull the submacro from below it. So you will see that as adding submacros as we go through our demo. Adding a command button to a form. You have worked a lot in the previous tutorials using the control wizard. You've worked with the control wizard in earlier tutorials. Some people say it looks like a cigarette with ashes falling off the tip. Really, it's a magic wand with stars coming off. And if it's turned on, when you click and add your command button, it will fire up the command button wizard. If it's turned off, as you add your command button, you'll be able to add the properties to the command button yourself. If you forget to turn the command button or the control wizard off before you add the command button, it's no big issue. Just click cancel. The wizard will stop and your command button is on the form. I'll do a demo of that one as well. Here where we're attaching the submacro to a command button, we will see the events actually here on the event tab. We've created a caption alignment. There's the command button. We'll take a look at this later. One thing you'll notice here, it's command 42, and when we come to this one, I have changed the name of the command buttons. It is just good design practice that whenever you're creating an object on a form, a command button, a text box, a label, is that you give it a name, and the name uses the standard naming conventions. So if I'm creating a command button, I'm going to name it CMD for command plus whatever it is the button does. Like in this particular case, print selected record. No spaces, and use capital letters to divide the words up so that the eye can easily see that this is what this particular command button does. So you see here I've done the CMD, print selected record. That is the name that I've given command 42. And the quick check answers, you will find these in lecture notes that are posted for you. Next, I'm going to do a demo of these sections that we just covered, and then I will resume the PowerPoint presentation.